Well, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back once again to the ASCENT podcast. My name is Bryan, and I'll be your guide as we continue to work our way towards self-excellence. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about say what it is that you need, want, and expect from others. And the reason we felt this was important is a lot of the times we never really communicate what it is we need, want, or expect from the people in our lives because for whatever reason, we feel like they just should be mind readers. They should just be able to intuit whatever it is that we're thinking we need, we want, or we expect from them. And obviously, that's not the case. The other side of that coin is I think a lot of times is we're afraid. We're afraid of how they may respond, if there's going to be any judgment associated with the things we may ask for from a wants, needs, and expectation standpoint. So we hold it back and we don't share what it is we want, need, and expect. But here's the question. When things go wrong, as they often do, whose fault is it when you don't get what it is you need, want, or expect? Yours, or the person who didn't give you what you needed, wanted, or expected, but you never shared what those things were? That's what we're going to talk about today. I have a great panel with me, so let's get into it. Folks, how you doing this morning?
Doing great. Doing great. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Chris, how about you?
Blessed to be here, my friend. Blessed to be here.
Very good, very good. Well, let's get right into this. I wanted to bring this subject up because I think as communicators, and one of the things to be, your best self, live your best life, you have to learn to be a really good communicator. And part of that process is communicating things that you want, need, or expect in your life and how to be brought into your life and delivered in certain ways from other people that you interact with. And again, that's going to obviously apply across many levels within your life, whether it's family, friends, business relationships, friendships, so forth and so on. So that's what we want to get into today, is really talking about what those things look like, how to be a better communicator, and why it's really relevant that we do these things, because it helps to kind of just tee everything up to have a more successful pathway and a better relationship. So with that in mind, Erica, I'll start with you from sharing what it's important to you and why you think that's relevant. How about you give us a little bit of background and what your thoughts are about that?
As a family lawyer, and I've practiced family law for about 25 years now, I've seen the ins and outs of what can happen if we fail to communicate our feelings, our desires in a way that the other person can understand them. So there are a lot of times when we think that we're saying things in a way that the other person understands, but when we fail to follow up on the questions, did you understand what I am saying, or do you what did you hear from the words that I've just spoken to you? Um, Things can be very misconstrued, and not only will it be painful when that happens, it can also be very expensive when that happens. So
Yes.
um, getting down that communication and taking the time out to find out if the person heard what you were trying to convey in the manner that you were trying to convey it is an essential life skill for career, for family, um, for any type of endeavor that you do.
100%. Thank you for sharing that. And, it's interesting because you are absolutely right. We're going to come back and we're going to dive deeper into that piece of not only communicating it, but validating what was communicated, because that's a piece that's kind of the next level of it that I believe gets overlooked quite a bit. So, Chris, what about you? What would you like to share regarding why you think it's important or relevant that we really do express upfront, our wants, needs, and expectations?
Well, I think I think it's important. I mean, obviously, for me, when I think about this, obviously, when you send me these things, I'm thinking about it, and there's always two pieces for me. There's my professional wants, needs, and expectations, and my personal wants, needs, and expectations. And sometimes, I mean, they're obviously independent of themselves, but in the environment that we live in every day, that's something they cross over more often than not. And I think that's a part of that communication piece. Now you and I have been friends for decades,
Mhm.
and we've established ways that we communicate within each other. A lot of it is verbal, but there's a lot of nonverbal cues that because of the fact we've known each other so long, I know that in my heart of hearts, you as an example know how to support a lot of my wants, needs, and expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I try to stay out of when it comes to people, especially people that are close to me. I try to keep the expectation piece lower on the scale, because I don't think that that's really fair, because I think sometimes when people start interjecting expectation into the program, that becomes it becomes the lead dog in the equation. And I think a lot of times we can, I think you see it on a day in and day out situation where that leads to misunderstanding, miscommunication, and just a general failure to be able to understand how you can, and I'll lean into how you can support me, or the converse is how I can support you. So we run into that, and I think a lot of times it's kind of like that lazy eye. You know what I mean? You you got a lazy eye, but you're like, yeah, it's a lazy eye. You know what I mean? And if you don't clarify it, a lot of times it takes an effort. I think people as a whole, they'll put a piece out and expect you to understand it top to bottom. And the reality is, Bryan, you have other things going on in your life. Erica, you have other things going on in your life. If I had pulled you in, we all have different things. There's so many different things going on. So a lot of times you're going to get a certain amount of my attention. And if it's something that requires a great deal of detail, that's on me or you to be able to convey that to me to where I can understand, and more importantly, acknowledge it. You know what I mean? And that's part of that piece, is acknowledging what it is I've said, and sometimes repeating it back so you understand exactly what the expectation of you is going to be.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. So then let's back up a step, because I think one of the key components to all of this, and one of the things obviously we focus on here at the ASCENT Academy is, self-awareness and that awareness piece of it all. So I think that's, if we go from a first things first standpoint, you have to first be able to determine what it is that you do want, need, or expect, right? And so spending that time, I think, is a key part of it. So Erica, I'll come to you first and say, what have you done in the past? What are some of the techniques or things that you've done just to get clarity for you first before you even start to push it out there as to what's relevant and what is going to be important as you move forward?
For me, I think one of the key pieces is taking out that time to be alone, to go off somewhere and to sit by water, sit by a pool, sometimes just to be in my own backyard on my patio and just sit and really be quiet. And I found that when I'm quiet and I quiet all the noise around me, the universe really does send you answers. And there's a part of your creativity that just kind of triggers when you're still. And so that's been my experience. And when I do that, I'm able to start writing down. And you try to write it, at least I do. I try to write it down before I forget it, and things just come to you. I truly believe that when you just stay still, don't make a quick decision, don't go off of impulse, don't go off of feelings, just be still, someplace quiet. And whether it's just sitting there or praying or meditating or whatever you want to call it, the answers come to you. I really think that deep inside of us, we all have our own intuition from experiences or from what our parents have taught us or things that we've experienced, seen others experience. And if we just take that time out, you really can find those answers. The answers come to you as to what you want and what you need and how you feel. Because if you're just going through life and you're going to work, you're going to this, you're running to that, and you're not taking time out to really assess, who do I want to be? Who was I created to be? What my purpose is? Then you're just moving, right? You just move. How do you know what you want? Because you're doing everything everybody else wants. Because other people will create the agenda for your life if you let them. And it's always going to be in their best interest, not necessarily yours. I don't care how much you love them or they love you. It's always going to be their agenda. If you don't stop and create the agenda that suits the purpose of why God created you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Chris, what about you? What would you like to share as far as that goes?
Now, what was it? I'm bad. I was in some thought.
No, just what have you done in the past to try to get clear on what it is you want, need, and expect? Not so much for that particular person, but just in general, just in life, the things that you want, need, and expect in your life.
Well, I think it's, one of the things it starts with is obviously I'm not in my 20s anymore. And I know when I was in my 20s, I was just shooting for, I think I was having a conversation about this yesterday. I was, I shot from the hip a lot. You know what I mean? And I've found out that my best way, I try to plan things as best as possible. I mean, I am spontaneous, but for me, the world becomes a lot less chaotic when I have my goals in front of me, and I start to work on a plan, how to get to those goals. And from there, I can develop the needs and expectations beyond that. But I think that's that thing. Sometimes I think you may have said that word or not, Erica, being still sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a very transformative state right now, Brian. You know this because we're side by side a lot. And what I'm finding is that sometimes what works for me is just being still and allowing when things haven't been completely defined yet, or there's some mystery in it, or there's some guesswork going on. Being kind to myself, because I get a little aggro when I haven't figured it out yet, and I think a lot of people do that. You're like, why haven't I figured this out? And the reality is you haven't figured it out because you haven't figured it out yet. That's what the reality is. But most of us, if you understand your track record, then you know that you have a history of figuring things out, and I have a history of figuring things out. And now, with the difference between today and then, what used to be was I'm now not getting on myself about it, or just becoming unreasonable with myself as far as my own expectations of myself, because that's where it starts. It's your expectations of yourself, and then that kind of mushrooms out to the people that are a part of your universe. You know what I mean? And then from there, it's as you drill down, what should I reasonably be able to expect from Bryan? What should I reasonably be able to expect from Erica? What can I reasonably expect to, say, my family members? You know what I mean? And being able to really kind of target what is reasonable, because I think at the end of the day, that's a word I don't think we use enough, is what's reasonable. You know what I mean? It's all at the root of I expect, or I want, or I need. And those are interchangeable words that it can change the dynamic of the sentence so drastically. And a lot of people, I don't think a lot of people can do that. They don't think they do that well. You know what I mean? They just lock in on, this is my want, which should automatically translate into my expectation of you. Well, maybe you're not the person that can actually help me get it done. And that's also part of knowing, per se, what your audience or your peer group is. What can I reasonably expect out of this person? Yeah. And more importantly, do I have the right to ask them? I think that's one of those things that I don't think we zero in on. Do I have the right to ask this person to support my wants, my need, and ultimately my expectation?
Right.
Absolutely.
I think the last year I've kind of come to learn that what you just said, in that having expectations for people, I think I've learned just to kind of lean back on that and just let people's actions show me where they belong in my life, and who they are, what they can do. And I think the older I'm getting, the more I'm focused on differentiating what are my needs and what are my wants. And can someone be in just the want category, which means they're kind of dispensable, right? They're just, or, if I have a need, is this someone or is this some place that I feel safe that I can say, this is what I feel like I need today, or this is what I feel like I want to, that's important to how I'm feeling or my goals. Is this a safe place for me? I think the older that I get, the more I'm differentiating between what a need is and what I just want. And even more importantly, why I feel like I want it and why I feel like I need it. That's in in all set. And it was my birthday last month, so I think I've been having a lot of these reflections on life. And also, like you said, what right do I have to ask?
Yeah.
What right do I have to ask, especially if it's not openly offered?
Yeah, agreed. So I mean, I'll chime in a couple different pieces because Erica, I agree with you about finding a place of peace for yourself. Like you said, if it's by the water or at the park on a bench, whatever it might be, somewhere where you can kind of clear your head and gather your own thoughts to try to figure out the pieces and parts that are relevant to you. And obviously, the reason I wanted to bring this in is because that changes as you go through life. Chris was saying, in his 20s, that list of what he felt he wanted or needed, or the expectations that were out there, this is going to be a totally different list in probably your 30s, and then it shifts again maybe in your 40s, and so on and so on, right? So that's another piece of it too. Now, here's what's interesting is sometimes as you make that journey and you're transitioning through those decades, certain people will transition with you, others may fall off,
Yeah.
possibly because of those very reasons, right? What you want, need, or expect. Maybe that person can't deliver as they could when you were in your 30s, but now you're in your 50s, right? So that's another piece to start to be aware of is maybe why sometimes there does become this distance or this gap with certain people that maybe you used to be really close to. And that's because the wants, needs, and expectations that are there might have shifted or changed, and maybe what you want or need is totally different than what that person has the capacity to actually be able to deliver. So that's one piece to look at. Another thing that I like to do is, as she talked about, just kind of get the thoughts out of your head and onto paper, whether it's just bullet points or journaling in some way, because I think that helps to get some focus to it as to, where you want things to go. And then from there, I then try to do a kind of a prioritization process, right? Which ones of these boil up to the top as the top two or the top three, and stay focused there because the list could be long, right? But who can really manage all of that? So that's kind of a process I go through to try to figure out wants, needs, and expectations when I'm first really, maybe feeling like I'm in a stage of transition, or maybe you've started a new job or a new career, or you've transitioned into a different space. What you may want, need, or expect also may shift along with that too. So it's a never ending process, I guess, is the point that I wanted to bring up. This is not something you do once and then you're done. It kind of continues to go on. Erica, what thoughts do you have on that, just from the process and staying true to that process as time goes by?
I think you always have to reassess, always have to have that time out and just look at your notes and really see, is this still where I want to go? And if you have to pivot, make a few changes, don't be afraid of that and don't be hard on yourself. Allow yourself that grace to say, I'm growing, I'm finding new interests. The saying, when you when you know better, or when you learn better, then you do better. Just be graceful with yourself, not be so hard. I think that's really a key point as we're making our notes and assessing our goals, or we figure out what we want the end to look like, the result to look like. We're working backwards as the plan of what are the steps we need to go through to get to that end result that we visualize. And be graceful. Be,
Hmm.
be graceful with ourselves. I think we're hard on other people sometimes because we're way too hard on ourselves. You know, just be nice to ourselves as we're making these changes and growing. Um, if you don't get everything you want in life, that you're not a failure. I mean, this is our life. This is what the universe has brought to us. Enjoy it. I think we spend so much time trying to acquire things and people, and just be nice to yourself. Remember, the Bible says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. If you don't love yourself and be graceful to yourself, then you're going to be treating your neighbor like crap. So if anybody ever treats you badly, really it's a reflection on how they feel about themselves for that very reason. The Bible does not say be nicer to others than you are to yourself. It says love your neighbor as you love yourself. So I think it's important that all of us take out that time to love ourselves. And then when you start loving on yourself and caring for yourself and valuing your feelings, then you really can take that time out to look at others and say, what can I give to that person? How can I help validate how that person is feeling and let them know that I receive what I heard them say in the manner that they meant to express it. So what, like you said earlier, the question you asked, about communication and, understanding what the person has said, it's important for us when someone tells us something that we say, okay, this is what I hear you say, and let me know, if that's not what you said or that's not how you meant it. Give them the opportunity to express themselves, and also give them the opportunity to correct or kind of help you process what they're sharing, and be graceful about it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just be like, what the hell you said? No. Okay. This is what I heard, and and this is what I observed. This is the way. This is what I expected. This is the way what I observed or what I heard, how it made me feel, and then give them the opportunity. It's really just being calm, and if you're graceful with yourself, then it's a bit easier to be graceful with others, because we all mess up. We all say, I'm a pretty sensitive person. And honestly, one of my very dear friends had, in a very nice way, put me in check about, I was just kidding around. And, I was told, well, we've never joked like that before.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was kind of taken aback, like, what do you mean? And that person expressed to me that I think it kind of hurt that person's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And it said like that. It was said in a very manly way, but but nevertheless, it doesn't matter that I was joking. It doesn't matter. What matters is, how did my words make that other person feel? What did that other person hear? It doesn't matter. So I was very quick to apply. Say, I apologize. I apologize. It doesn't matter how I was kidding, but that doesn't matter. What matters is how I made you feel. And I think when we care about people, first of all, when we care about ourselves enough to treat ourselves like that, it's easier to care about somebody else and care about their feelings, and know that it doesn't make you a bad person to have to go back and be like, wait a minute, I hurt someone's feelings, or I said it in a manner that it didn't come out the way I intended. But it starts with being graceful with ourselves.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Chris, any thoughts you want to add on that? Because if not, I do have something I wanted to bring into this.
Well, I think, truthfully, I mean, what you did, Erica, what you just mentioned, I think a lot of us have gone through it, and I think a lot of us go through it. Because at the end of the day, Bryan, we talk about this all the time. Everybody's going through something. You know what I mean? We got friends that are going through divorces. I'm going through this growth phase from a lot of some tragedy that I've dealt with over the last month. And the thing I think that is hard for me every once in a while when it comes to stuff like this, and I can only imagine it's hard for others too, is the fact that, like I said, I've been going through, I hate bringing it up, but it is my reality. I got hit by a car back in October. I was dealing with a tumor on my cornea for a few months after that. So all this stuff that really scared the life out of me, I've been dealing with. and now we're dealing with how that's making me feel moving forward, how it's changed my my priorities with my life. Some of the things I do daily that now they were nice to have things, and now there are things that I do daily that I have to have. They're just a part of who I am and what I'm about and where I'm trying to go. You know, you Bryan, you and I are golfers, so I talk a lot in golf analogy, and I'm at this is literal. For me, I'm in the back nine of my life, right? I don't know if anybody plays golf and who doesn't. So the golf is front nine, back nine. So I'm on the back nine of my life. So I'm trying to so as much as I can, I'm trying to make up for some of the things that I didn't do as well in the front nine, some of my poor play, maybe some of my poor attitude, maybe just the way I poorly looked at things. And I'm trying to improve that day in and day out. So I'm trying to become more of an asset in life, period, and especially to the folks that are in my small universe. I'm trying to be that friend that's like, well, we know what Chris is going to do. He's going to support wherever he can. And that's something that I try to put out to the universe on a day in and day out basis. Even on my bad days, I'm still trying to, even in disagreement and discomfort, I'm trying to show that I'm trying to be a part of the solution as opposed to being part of the problem. And I think people kind of go in and out of that whole mindset. You know what I mean? We want to, for me, it's almost becoming that thing that I gotta have and I gotta do and I gotta, and it makes life easier for me, because it also pulls in that you've hit on a couple times during this broadcast is the kindness piece, being kind to myself, but also being kind to others, because I don't know what you're going through. I mean, sometimes we get together with people, we butt heads, just like you just said. Your friend was obviously I'm going to use the word offended by whatever you joked with her or whatever. It happens. It happens. The cool thing about you and Bryan and myself is I think we're the type of people that when that's brought to our attention, then maybe I don't even understand why I offended you, but I'm going to apologize to you to begin with while I'm trying to seek the knowledge as to figure, especially if I can't figure it out right away. Well, how did I offend this person? That's not the point. The point of the matter is they were offended. You should apologize, and then you can figure it out and move forward from there. But first and foremost, don't be dismissive. And I know we all probably hate that in people. Don't be dismissive. If I said this bothered me, at least at the very minimum, acknowledge it. You know what I mean? And we can move from there.
100%. So I want to shift up a little bit because I want to go back to a couple of different things that have been shared, and I won't necessarily say it's challenging your position on it, but I want to get your thoughts and perspective on it. So a couple of things that have been mentioned. One was what's reasonable and the expectation. I believe Chris mentioned that. Another thing that's kind of a word that I put was entitlement. What am I entitled to from a needs, wants, and expectation standpoint? So that's another piece. And then the last piece of the puzzle that I want to throw in is to say authenticity or being authentic. And that's primarily being authentic for yourself or to yourself, right? So meaning I have a right to stand on what it is I feel I want, need, and respect, whether it's something that's reasonable for you or not, right? Because that's authentically me, right? So just using that as the position to take. So Erica, I'll start with you. With those thoughts in mind, how would you approach that? What would be your conversation, or how would you share that with someone to say, authentically, this is who I am. This is what I want, need, and respect. I'm not bringing it from an entitlement standpoint, I don't think. But is it reasonable for you? Maybe, maybe not. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for me, first finding out who I am. What do I enjoy? What do I value? What do I like? Who am I? I think first you have to ask who you are and the things that you just naturally enjoy. What do you want your life to look like? What do you envision for your life at the phase that you're in? As a woman, we have different phases. I'm sure men do too. But definitely from my experience as a woman, when you're a teenage girl, you envision one thing, and then when you're in your 20s and 30s, definitely 40s and 50s, there are other ways that you envision your life. So really, you have to envision who you are and where you want to be, and then from there, you can decide what those wants are based on who you authentically um, are at that time. Um, just really going backwards, because you asked first about the reasonable expectations. Going back to who you are authentically are, once you get to know yourself a little bit better, then you can go into, okay, what are my wants and what are my needs from there? And then you go and you look at your circle and say, reasonable expectations. Well, what I've learned now, and I'm very proud to say, I'm in that. What did you say? I'm not a golfer. Is you said, Chris, the back nine?
Back nine.
That's what I am too. So now I can. I'm proud to say that I'm in that stage of life, and I've learned that I suggest that you let people be who they are, and you accept them as they are, and people can give you only so much emotion, only so much time as they have. And don't put pressure on people to be more than they are. Just love them as they are. Now, what does that mean? Love them as they are. That doesn't mean you let them treat you any old kind of way. That doesn't mean that they get to be inconsistent or say they're gonna do one thing and then they don't. If that's who they are, accept that's who they are, and you properly allow them to be in that space in your life where a person like that belongs, wherever that is, right? But reasonable expectations means, in my opinion, reasonable expectations means that you allow people the space to show you who they are, and then you decide based upon your authentic self where they belong. But
Okay.
you don't put them into any other kind of pressure, because once you do, what you're trying to make a duck into a pigeon. Let a duck be a duck, let a pigeon be a pigeon, let a turtle be a turtle, let a whale be a whale. And then, regardless of what animal it is, you're together because you're happy. The goal is love yourself, be graceful to yourself, enjoy life. We're only here for a limited amount of time. And then you get to spend eternity either in heaven or hell, one or the other. But on this earth, you only have so much time. Enjoy your life. And if you're around people for whatever, they grumpy, they got all this, blah, 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 let them do them where they are. And then
Absolutely.
in your life, you decide, where does a grumpy, negative person belong, right?
Right.
But you'll be happy. Because at the end of the day, unless you're a twin or triplet or something, you come into the world. And even then, they don't come out at the same time. Triplets don't come out all at once. They come out one at a time. So, we all came out individually. So
That's
you have
absolutely
to
right.
decide authentically what makes you happy, and then go from there. As far
Okay.
as reasonable expectations, a reasonable expectation is, let a duck be a duck, let a goose be a goose, let a pigeon be a pigeon, let a chicken be a chicken.
Yeah. Agreed. So, Chris, let me bring it to you then, because obviously I think reasonable was one of your words. And then let's bring it back to the opposite side of that coin. As I said, you're being authenticity for you, being true to yourself, and maybe what it is you want, need, or expect maybe isn't always reasonable. Where should you water it down, or should you stand on you being authentic to yourself? What makes the most sense to you?
Well, first and foremost, I think being authentic it should be a natural part of the process. I don't want to be known as fake. I mean, even if you don't agree with what I'm talking about, I want you to say at the end of the day, I know who this man is. I know what he's about. He's pretty much stays on a certain line. But matter of fact, I work very hard at being authentic, because I actually believe that in certain circles, I'm misunderstood.
Mhm.
People don't really understand what motivates me, what what my true purpose is, because I'm just figuring out what my true purpose is. So I can, if I'm just figuring out what my true purpose is, how the hell do I expect you to know what my true purpose is when I haven't figured it out yet? Mm-hmm. So as I'm working on it, because like I said, I mentioned earlier, I'm in a transformative stage right now. I own it. I admit to it. I don't have, even at my age, I don't have all the answers. I'm quick to tell you I don't have all the answers. I don't think that makes me any less smart. I don't think that it makes me any less seasoned. I don't think that makes me any less anything. It just makes me what I am. And I just think that if you're going to deal with me, good, bad, or indifferent, then you need to understand, what my value system is about, what my truth meter, how it reads, things of that nature is. Like I said, you don't always like what comes out of my mouth, but that's not my job for you to like everything that comes out of my mouth. My job for me when I put myself first, because I think a lot of people, and there's a difference between putting yourself first and being selfish. Let's be clear on that first and foremost. Yes. But being true to yourself is a lot less painful than watering yourself down and shrinking like a violet when people, because people are going to project on you. Let's be clear on it. Even your bestest of friends, unless your name is Brian Murray, they're going to project on you. And that's not that they're bad people. That doesn't mean they want bad for you. Everybody has an objective and a goal tied up in these wants, needs, and expectations. And sometimes they kind of, people make them interchangeable. Like, okay, so when we're talking about, even me thinking that I'm being reasonable might be unreasonable to you, but that's the part where we talk about it. You know what I mean? I have some built-in questions I ask. So when I tell you what I want, need, or expect, my usually follow-up question is that reasonable? Mm-hmm. And this is the part where you get to tell me, Chris, that's reasonable, or Chris, that is not reasonable, and we can explore it from there. I actually, on the level of communicating with the people that are really close to me, the people that I spend a lot of time with, that I've spent time with over the years, I expect you to have that conversation with me. I don't expect you to like I said, back up or withdraw from the situation. I expect us to get into it. You know what I mean? Because maybe there's something I'm not seeing here, and I actually need your help to see it. You know what I mean? That's where I'm at. You know what I mean? As much as you hate being wrong, because we all hate being wrong. Let's be real here, right? The fact of the matter is, every once in a while, there ain't, as I like to say, there ain't that much right in the world. Okay, so you know, if I'm wrong, if you're one of my supporters, one of my really great friends, one of my confidants, somebody that I have on the short list, you need to be prepared to tell me about myself every once in a while. Because you're only going to, what you're going to do is help me. Yep. You know what I mean? I may not enjoy it to begin with, but if I know where it's coming from your authentic self, then I can get on board. Okay, well, maybe I need to rethink this, Chris.
Yep. So it's funny you bring that up, because I just made a note, and the word was accountability, right? And that's exactly what you're talking about, Chris, is in those situations when you're having those conversations, someone that's going to hold you accountable, have a position on it to say, well, that's reasonable or unreasonable. And it's funny, Chris, I know we have talked, as you said, many, many times about many, many different things. And I know I shared with you one time, we were talking about, being a mentor and showing some guidance and that kind of thing. And I said, I can't be your mentor without sometimes being your tormentor. And that's true, because that's the other side of the coin. You have to bring, as I say, the yin and the yang of it to the table and be open and talk about that. But going back to where we first started with this conversation, that's where I think people fall short, is either, as I said, they think people just intuit, you should know and read my mind, that's how I feel about that. Or we have this fear, or we're afraid because we don't want to be seen pushy, or we don't want to be too forward, or we don't want to be rejected or judged, or whatever else that it might be. So we don't say the things that we should say. And that's on both sides. That's speaking outbound as to what it is I want, need, and expect. Or that's someone placing a want, or need, or expectation on you, you feeling as if it's unreasonable, but then not saying anything to say that it's unreasonable, and you just wallow and accept it. So there's two sides to that coin. Well, Erica, what thoughts do you have on that piece? Because I think that's a key component of it. How do you get down that road cleanly from an accountability standpoint?
Well, as far as what was the second question about the expectations for
Expectations, and really just,
others' companies?
how do you sort that out when the next expectation that maybe has been placed, uh, you as a person receiving that expectation, that need, that want, you feel it's unreasonable. However, you don't voice that. How
I,
do
yeah, and I hate to describe myself as this, but I really like just to make people happy. And so uh, when I'm in that situation, I really have had to work on myself to speak up and to share. I don't feel comfortable with this. I, I cannot do this, or this does not make me happy, or I don't have the time for this, or this just isn't good for me. I think wanting, especially when you care about somebody, you love people. Um, and again, if you don't set your own agenda, people will set that agenda for you. For me, that has been very difficult to say no to people that I love, but ultimately to be your authentic self and to finish the race that you've been put on the earth to run, you have to express to people, this just isn't for me. This situation's not for me, or I cannot give you what you need at the I can't give you what you need. Let me just say it this time. I can't give you what you need, or I'm I'm not for you, or this is not for you. Whether it's a career, the situation is not for you at a company, or in a relationship. I think that has been something that I am working on myself, and I work with people in relationships for a living, and I am coming to understand that a person will be much happier if you just express that and allow the other person to receive what you're saying.
agree?
And it helps save time,
Agree.
right? it,
Yeah.
it might it might make you, because if you're a people pleaser like me, it might make you a little uncomfortable, but I tell you what, you won't be stressed out trying to figure out how you're going to make things work in a situation that you didn't want to be in the first place.
Yeah, that's that people pleasing thing that we've talked about before, and we've done an episode specifically on that, of getting yourself out of that mode of being people pleasing, and standing your ground, and different things like that. So that's a key component. Chris, anything you want to add on that?
Well, I mean, for me, it's probably the most simple thing is we're such as a society, I'm going to put it on that level. As a society, we're so conflict averse. So
Yeah.
everything, I think where we are today, and I don't know I don't know how we got here. I mean, it's one of those head scratchers for me, but we're in such a society now that everybody is conflict averse. And when there's conflict, that automatically means I'm pulling my guns out. And I don't mean that figured, literally, but I gotta get on this side. You got to get on the side, and we got to start shooting at each other. That means none of the above in my book. Just because we have conflict, actually, I want to see how we act in conflict. So in other words, when I run into conflict, even or potential conflict, let's go there. If I run into potential conflict with someone who I'm close with, because that's a lot of times what you run into. It's a little less with the folks the folks that are on the periphery of our lives. It's easy to kind of swat them back.
Yeah.
But the people that we're close to, that family members, best friends, spouses, dating partners, whatever you want to say. That's the area that I want to see how we can function. I always said this when I'm currently single, but I always say whenever I date anybody and I meet a woman and we start, there's interest, I say, now, there's going to come a point in time when we're going to have a disagreement / fight. How are we going to behave? Is it going to be an adult thing, or are we going to go to junior high school? Because I want to see that. I want to see how you act. I mean, I'm not looking for it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not in a perfect world where there's no disagreements. We're all good. And everything is hunky dory. But we all know that that's not the case. We just know that's not the case. And if you think like that, then you're delusional. Okay, I'm gonna be the first one to tell you, you are freaking delusional. Okay. Matter of fact, sometimes you find out what you really got on your hand when you have that first disagreement. Do they go DEFCON 5 on you? Or it's like, let's keep it down here. Let's talk about this like two adults.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for that. If someone goes like dry grass on me and it's like, dry grass with a match.
Yeah.
I'm now looking at you. You know what I mean? So you get the one or the two. We get to three. I'm like,
yeah.
Was this really? Did you really have to go there over something so that I view as innocuous? I don't view, when I say innocuous, I don't view it from the standpoint that how you're feeling is not important. But I also there's levels to this thing. You know what I mean? And being in a disagreement about somebody about whether you should meet at 5:30 or whether you should meet at 6 o'clock is, it's a nothing burger. Okay. Mm-hmm. But I always look at how people act when we disagree.
Yeah,
while you mentioned that, Chris, let me tell I've been married one time, and during our marriage, it was a long time ago that I was married, but I was married for a short period of time. We're actually still very close friends and business partners, but when we would have a disagreement, I would faint, because in the household that I grew up in, my parents were kind of high school sweethearts, and they had their own disagreements, but that was back in the day, all that kind of stuff. They had grown folk discussions outside of the earshot of children. And so when I got married, and if we had a disagreement, and we never had big blowout disagreements, but any time where now I could sit down and communicate and voice what I'm feeling, I would faint. And so it'd be like, what the hell? Because I would I'd be like,
oh my goodness.
In the middle of a class. And he wasn't saying, he's a big and tall guy, but he wasn't intimidating or threatening. It was just out of conflict. My body just shut down. Wow. So I wasn't married long because he thought he made me so miserable, and he really did not. But I wasn't, again, as you learn, you get older and you try to learn more about yourself. I wasn't a situation that I was in, I didn't know how to communicate and process. And these weren't heated arguments. He didn't talk down to me. He didn't, call me, nothing like that. It was just conflict, like you just mentioned. You have to see how you handle disagreements. I would hit the floor and faint in the middle. So for him, he didn't want to have too many of those conversations. I'm falling on the floor.
That makes sense.
But you're right. You really have to, in work relationships, we have to teach our children as we prepare them to go into the workforce how to engage in those conversations with your coworkers. And I was okay with that. I've always got along well with coworkers, and if we needed to, come together as a team, I was fine with that. But just, and we also have to equip our children in personal relationships. How do you have those conversations, especially without fainting? Like, how do you have a grown-up conversation, and talk? I think that's a real important skill. I have lovely parents, but I think that was something I was not equipped for. So You're right. That when you said that made me think about that.
Yes, absolutely.
I just fall.
That's pretty amazing, as you said, and that impacts both people in the relationship, because you don't want to go there because you know how your body's going to react. He doesn't want to go there because he doesn't want to see you react that way. So then it becomes this void between you, right? Because no one wants to cross that conflict bridge, right? And so it's very interesting. I have a note here too, and I was just talking about that. And Chris, this goes back to what you were saying a few minutes ago, and then even what Erica was just sharing. I think the overarching thing that I put down was just, we all need to become better upfront communicators. So Chris, you were just sharing about, if you started to date someone and said, all right, we at some point, we're going to have a conflict or argument, a fight, a disagreement. How are we going to address that? And you're actually getting into that before the fact, not during or after the fact, right? And that's a piece of it that I think people overlook, and especially when you talk about your wants, needs, and expectations. Those are the things that it's really better to do the upfront communication piece of versus trying to come in from behind and go, oh, well, I didn't really share this with you before, but I don't like this, or I want this, or I need that. But it's after the fact, because now you put this person in a position, maybe they're not capable of doing it in that way, or don't have the capacity to do it in that particular way and deliver what it is that you need. However, if you had the conversation up front, it gives them an opportunity to say, well, I can't, or I'm not able to now, but maybe I can learn, or maybe I can adapt. But without that conversation up front, you don't get that opportunity. So I think that's a key piece of it to look at is, having those upfront communications and getting better at that in all of our relationships as we, kind of move our way through life. So what I want to do now is I want to kind of transition this just a little bit, staying in the same vein of being, better communicators, saying what you need, want, and expect. Specifically, now I want to frame this because we all have been in positions where we're leaders, are leaders of our own companies, organizations, management jobs, those type things. How is this relevant? And Erica, I'll start with you because especially being an entrepreneur and a business owner, from a setting the needs and wants and expectations as a leader, what have been some of the things that you found valuable in that particular arena?
Really communicating what those expectations are and making sure that the expectations are well documented and having those conversations even before you begin um, working together as a team to determine whether or not it's really a good fit and whether that person has a skill set and personality um, to mesh in with the group that you're leading and a willingness to learn because a lot of things you cannot teach somebody, such as personality and grit and uh, teamsmanship. Uh, that's those are some of the things that I really have come to value as a leader. And then also, does that person bring something to the table? Are they able to bring something to the table to help the team in a way that's very unique? Um, a diverse group of people and communicating those expectations is everything. And when you observe something, I've learned um, it's like I'm always it's I have to reiterate it to myself. When you observe something, really communicating at that time what you observe and what the expectation is, and how it impacts the team and the mission, and that none of us are above the mission. Not a founder, not a new partner, not an associate, not an administrative person. No one is above the mission. The company is above everything, and making sure that everyone on the team understands that. And usually the mission will be making sure that there are results and keeping everyone focused on we have to get the results. In order for each of us to reach our goals, we have to make sure that the company reaches its goal. So, openly communicating um, the successes of the team and then openly communicating and quickly addressing when there's been a failure to meet the needs of that organization is essential, just so everyone understands that ultimately it is the company, not the co-founders, not any employee. It is the company.
Understood. Agreed. Agreed. Thank you for sharing that. Chris, what about you? As in a leadership role, what's your philosophies as far as communicating the wants, needs, and expectations go?
Of the corporate situation or the
Yes.
professional. Well, I think being upfront, like I said, we talk. Obviously, you figured out I try to be that upfront guy. I think it's very important that you, from day one, from the jump, you start to communicate what the goals, wants, and needs um, of the operation is. And you have to, for me, consistency pays. So you have to be consistent in the message. Sometimes, obviously, you have to retailer the message from time to time, from day to day, because otherwise it gets very mundane and it gets watered down because, if there's no variety in the message. But I think that's very important that we stay on top of that. And like I said, I'm guessing you're talking about from the leadership side of it. Me being a leader, you being a leader, Erica, you being a leader. It's what it's what you show your employees day in and day out, the people you work with, your partners, whatever. It's that consistency. I'm a firm believer in consistency pays. You just got to stay on top of it. Even on the days you're having a rough time, because we all have communicators do have problems communicating from time to time. We just do. We get tongue tied. We get a little beat down from just the fact that that's what we do. I talk. I tell people I talk for a living. I talk for mine. I'm in the business of getting people to do the things that I need them to do, or I'm in the business of getting people to come together. So that's kind of my claim to fame. So it's retailoring my message. It's the same message, but being able to retailer it from time to time, and understanding and knowing your audience, your group below you. Sometimes they need different things. Being able to identify those things, I think that's very important. And I like I said, at the end of the day, I think the consistency will pay. Even like I said, even back to even when people are, maybe the team's not hearing you. Maybe they don't 100% agree with certain things you're doing. It's your job to figure out how to get them to get on board with what you're ultimately trying to accomplish. And that's where the real work comes in.
Agreed. So I want to jump in there because and this goes all the way back kind of when we first started, and Erica was speaking about validation, meaning verifying what was communicated and then how it was received, and that it was received and understood. So as a leader, I think that is the most critical thing you can do, because you can sit there and you can pontificate all day about this is where we're going, this is what we're going to do, and blah, 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 blah. But how has that actually been received by your audience? In this case, obviously, your staff members, et cetera, et cetera. And then what's their actual level of understanding from an accountability, responsibility, yada, yada standpoint? So that's a key piece too. I think that we as leaders need to be aware and be ready to do that validation piece. Communicate A, but B, validate what was communicated, how it was received, understood, and that they now truly understand what their individual roles and responsibilities and accountability pieces are going to be based on what you shared. Because a lot of the times, obviously, we have so much going on as leaders. We get it, we say it, and we're ready to move on to the next thing. And 6 months later, things go south, and then it's like, well, I said this 6 months ago, but you didn't validate that they understood exactly what it is you delivered. So that for me as a leader, if there's something I would share, it would be that piece. Yes, say it, but also make sure you take the time to validate the understanding of what was shared. Is, I think, a key component of it.
Definitely. I'm learning. I'm learning and reminding myself of that often. Yeah. To be sure that it was understood.
Yes.
Well, let me pop in right quick for a quick.
Sure. No, go ahead.
That's under a banner I call getting agreement. So when we have situations that we're dealing with, even in our personal lives, situations that come up, I'm looking to get agreement. And sometimes getting agreement is actually, maybe we have to agree to disagree. But the point of the matter is I need for us to be somewhere with this thing. So it's either we're just going to keep it moving forward, or maybe we've got to stop and reassess and look at, what it is that's being asked. Maybe at the end of the day, we're going to find out through the mere process of it all, that maybe what a goal is maybe it's not 100% something that we can get to in our current configuration. Maybe there's some stuff that has to be some behind the scenes things that need to occur, events need to actually occur that will get us closer to that goal, that need. But first and foremost, I need to know that the people that are around me, or the people that I'm counting on, we're in agreement. And I think that's very important. I think I think it's overlooked sometimes, especially from a leadership perspective, because we're leaders and we that's our expectation, is that our team will, get right behind us, and we're going, that's the boss and he wants this and blah blah blah. No, that doesn't necessarily, in a perfect world, yes. In the world that I live in, that's not always the case. You know what I mean?
100%.
Like a perfect example, I just had this happen a couple of weeks ago. I had a technician out on a job, and he was having just a dickens of a time trying to do what he was being asked to do. Well, his first mistake was, when we talked about this job, was I'm not on, we're at that age. I'm not on job sites. I don't hang out on job sites. That's not what I do. But what I told him was, I said, I think you're going to run into some challenges with what is being asked of you. I said, some of this is going to be super, super easy. Some of this is going to be, you're going to need a second set of eyes on this thing. Well, what happened was, I got a guy who's very prideful. He wants to take it on. He really wants to bring this thing home. In his heart of hearts, that's what he wants. But he's not going to use it. He's made a conscious decision not to use the resources that have been actually offered to him. And that's where he got himself in trouble. And I literally had to talk this kid down off the ledge. I mean, he was ready to quit. He was ready to do all this. He was showing his, he was muttering under his breath out on we're on somebody's job site. And he's out, and I know that people are listening. And I'm like, I get the call, and I'm like, I'm on my way. I go down. He is fit to be tied. Matter of fact, he's ready to walk off the job. And I'm like, that's not what we do. I understand your frustration. First of all, I acknowledged his frustration. I said, I understand your frustration level. But now let me point out some things to you. For one, I told you that you weren't alone on this. I was prepared to come in, be your second set of eyes when you made that call. I said, you made a conscious decision not to, for whatever the reason being, and we don't need to get into that today. You made a decision not to call me. And this is the end result of what happens. But now you're going to make our customer pay for your inability to work this process as you know it was available. How is that right? How does that make any sense at all today? So now what you've done is your inability to do what you worked with me for 2+ years. You know how I get down. I said, you decided to go away from that, and you're going to make us all pay the price for your pulling a step or two out of this process when you know how it could. And I mean, we had the conversation. He came back to me. He's like, you were right. I'm like, blah, blah, blah. I said, here's the part. I'm not angry. I said, I'm disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
I said, but we're a team. So I don't, you believe me, the guy that hired us called me, and I could have easily blamed everything on him. I could have easily done that. And a lot of bosses do that. Well, it's my guy. I said, I said, we had a bad day. We didn't do what we could have done better. We didn't do that. I said, but I stand behind my guy. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's a mistake. I stand behind my guy. And, so we went through that whole process. We actually got fired off the job. But the guy called me back a week later. He's like, I may have misjudged this a little bit. It was some of this is on the client for how they responded to it. I said, hey, I'm not here to judge anybody. I'm here to be consistent and do the things the way that I'm used to doing it. That it instills the confidence for you to have in me as a leader, and as well as an organization, to be able to bring home the goods. I said, stuff happens. I mean, we're not in a perfect world. Stuff happens. I said, I'd like to believe I'm consistent. I like to believe that people see me that way. I said, all I can do is put it out there every time and try to put it out there the same manner. And I'll let you be the judge at that point. You know what I mean? Your decision is final. You don't want to work with me moving forward, I'll respect that. You do want to work with me before, I'll respect that. However you want to let this play, let it play. And it's amazing because I just let it go. Yeah. And a week later, the guy calls me. He's like, I'm thinking, why is this guy calling me? Right? He's like, hey, I called because I may have jumped the gun on you. I appreciate what he said to me ultimately was, I want to applaud you for your professionalism throughout this. Because it would have been easy to start throwing stones from the other side. I said, at the end of the day, I got to look myself in the mirror. We made a mistake. I'll own it. If, I said, there were some things that I said, if you remember the conversations we had, we knew that this was coming. You know what I mean? I've been doing what I do for long enough that certain things I don't want it to be true, but there's certain things you're like, I just have a sneaky suspicion this is going to go down like this. Yeah. And I happen to be right. You know what I mean? It was one of those moments. I just happened to be right. But I was like, but this is not about my ego. You know what I mean? I want the end goal is what the end goal is. That's what I want, whether I'm involved or not in the picture. I just want the end result to be the end result. That's all I care about.
Yeah. And that's like Erica was saying a little while ago when she was talking about everybody being on board with the mission, right? Of what the company is and where we're trying to get to, and understanding that. And as you said, Chris, it's a we thing. It's not a me. It's not a they. It really is a we thing. And as leaders, that is a great position to come from. So I want to transition.
Let me share. Just like you had said about the other guy who was working under you, it's been my observation the last couple of decades that some of the people that have worked for me, I like to pride myself in that after they worked for me, they've gone to different types of careers in different areas and have been very successful and have done well. And as a leader, that's one of the things that you want. There's some people that as your career transitions, they're going to follow you. And there's some people that come underneath you, and then they'll go off and veer to other companies. They'll start climbing the ladders in those companies. And then you know what? I found that those people, if you treat them like you treated that guy, they remember that. And next thing you know, they're hiring you for stuff or asking to do a joint venture with you or wanted to do stuff. Because I have a few people that were, I hate to call them my subordinates, but they were like under my line. And I really have to say, they've been financially beneficial to me as they, expanded their careers. And a lot of it is really how you treated them and their thoughts about you as a leader, but also, is this the kind of person I want on my team? When I'm the leader, do I want my former boss, do I want to bring them in? And as leaders, we have to not just take it as a position of ego, but, teamwork, but also this person who's now, reporting to me, one day I really might be reporting to her. I have one joint venture that I'm doing, and it was an associate, and she actually came in to work for me as a clerk, like really new, hardly knew very much. Great legal researcher and writer, but not a litigator. But let me tell you that this lady is such a great business person. She is phenomenal. And I have to say, to anybody watching, just a little reminder that the people who now are reporting to you, they really, depending on how you treat them, can be a tremendous blessing to you personally and financially in ways that, when they first came through the door, you're like, does this person know how to sharpen a pencil? But if you treat them right, like you said, with that young person, when he felt like he blew it or something didn't go right, but when they understand that you'll have their back, when they get in those positions of leadership, and when they look around and try to figure out who do I want to call, or if they have questions and now they're in a leadership position and they need a leader mentor to help, who am I going to call? Well, they're going to call you because of how you treated them with respect, and how when they had a bad day, when they were feeling down, when they wanted to quit, when they just were thinking about changing careers totally, that you were the person that said, hey, slow down. Okay, yeah, you screwed up today. Yeah, that was, I ain't gonna lie, that was a big one right there. But let's figure out how we can get out of this today. And then, we can reflect, tomorrow, don't quit. Don't quit. You talented. Everybody, this was one of those days. Everybody got a day, and this was your day for sure. But let's get through it. People remember that.
I agree.
They do.
100%. Yeah, 100%. So I want to bring us to the last thing I want to get into today, and this is a perfect segue for it because we were talking about leaders, and then so now let's look at it from the standpoint of um, self development, because obviously we've covered a lot of different things today as far as you know self awareness, figuring out what it is you truly want, need, and expect just for yourself before you even push it out to others. Um, so, what are some of the things that we can do from a self development standpoint to help us sort that out as from the beginning of what our needs and expectations are? Authenticity, what is our authentic self? Figuring that out. Another piece of it, obviously, is going to be being a better communicator, which has two sides because, and we always talk about we have two ears, one mouth. So, listening is a key component to that. So, being a better listener, but then also being able to communicate, and again, being an upfront communicator as far as that goes. So, thinking about it from that standpoint, now, Erica, I'll go to you first. Um, what are some of the things or thoughts, or maybe things you've done in the past to help develop your personal skills in those particular areas that you could share with our audience?
I think one of the most important things that I've focused on is brain health, really making sure I am accountable to myself with what I eat, how much water I'm drinking, even down to how much fiber I'm intaking. Am I getting enough potassium? Am I getting enough sunlight? Is there enough vitamin D in my system? Am I getting enough rest? In order to be authentic self, in order to understand, what you need, what you want, you have to have a clear head. You really
Mhm.
do. And a part of that is watching what you digest physically and then also mentally, watching the environment that you're around, to really be your authentic self and to figure out what your needs are. You have to have a healthy brain, and that means that you have to create a healthy environment for yourself. And when anything threatens that, you have to be very strict about those parameters, because ultimately your mental health, your brain is going to kind of direct everything else. If you don't take care of yourself mentally, then everything else is going to fall apart. It's going to impact you physically. You're not going to be able to focus on your job. You're not going to be able to focus in relationships. Then that's going to impact your self-esteem, of course, your feeling of self-worth. Uh, but you have to be very protective about your brain and what you allow to impact that.
That's great advice. And I think that's something people don't think about at all. And so I'm really glad that you shared that because that really is some great information and just a new perspective to think about. Chris, what about you? What are some of the things that you've done in the past that have worked well or just help guide you in developing yourself in these particular skills?
Well, I think I've said this before in one of our talks, or we've had a number of talks. I take away a little, so everybody that's in my close circle, under my umbrella, let's use that phrase. Everybody has something that uniquely that I admire in them uniquely. Bryan, as someone who's been around me for 25 years, there are a lot of ways that I emulate you. You know this because we've worked in the trenches together for years. I used to be the guy that got all hot and bothered about when
Mhm.
something wasn't going right. I got all hot and bothered. Well, I'm kind of the exact opposite now because I've watched you not let yourself, never let them see you sweat. So even if underneath something is just making me absolutely crazy, I try to, I try to go through this process of just processing whatever the situation is, good, bad, or indifferent, and trying to come up with reasonable solutions. So there's the discipline piece of that. So having discipline, um, having that ability to work through a situation. Most of the time, we're talking about an adverse situation. It's never anything good because anything good is not hard to work through. Um, but just understanding that there is always a solution um, of some sort, some shape, form, or fashion. There's always a solution, and that being kind of the first thing. When something hits, you're like, okay, calm down. There is a solution here. It's it's up to me to figure, either by myself or with the help of someone else, figuring out what that solution is. It's never, I don't think I've run into anything. obviously I've made it this far, that I've run into anything that wasn't solvable at some point. It's a question of working through that, having the discipline to work through that process to get to that solution. And I think a lot of people, we're so caught. That's the other part of the society that I can't stand, is we're into this. It's instant gratification, or this has to be resolved right this moment. No, sometimes things take time. You know what I mean? You have to be self-aware enough to understand the situation, what you're involved in, or what's being presented to you, or what's being put in front of you. Is this something we can fix quickly? Is there so much information in front of us that we already have the answer? And if we don't, then how do we work our way to the answer? And that, like I said, that requires being a sound mind. It's really knowing your surroundings, knowing what's going on around you, knowing what your goal is in a particular, because in certain situations, your goals will be brought in. A lot of times your goals are brought into it. How does this align with my goal, what we're looking at? Sometimes there won't be the happy answer that you want at the end of it. And being understanding that there's a remote possibility that there is not a happy answer here, and having that ability to still keep moving forward, understanding that. That doesn't mean you're a failure. Even if you come up with a reasonable solution or something that makes everybody happy, it doesn't mean you failed. It just means that we just couldn't come up with a solution. Maybe there was just too much on it. Maybe there's just too much that, maybe the bar was set too high. There is such thing as the bar being set too high. You know what I mean? Let's be clear on that. There is that thing. So just understanding some of the dynamics that go around, and then, like you said, Erica, early on, about being kind. Being kind to yourself. When you don't come up, as leaders, that's one thing we suffer from. We always want to come up with a solution. We just do. Now a good percentage of the time we're going to come up with a solution, but there's that small percentage where we're not. And you've got to make peace with the idea that you couldn't come up with the answer, even through working through the whole process with competent individuals, that maybe there just wasn't an answer. You know what I mean? And how do we move forward from that? And intact, as people.
So. Absolutely. No, I could not agree more, Chris. Thanks for sharing that. And like you said, as leaders, we do have a lot of things that come into play that I think put us in a situation where we become our own worst critics, right? Because it's the buck stops here and all those other things that get thrown out when we are leaders and that type stuff. So then, what do you do in those situations? Is, as you said, be kind to yourself. Be willing to take a step back and get some distance from it. That oftentimes will be enough, because that'll give you a different perspective on it and allow you to see things that you didn't see when you were neck deep in it, right? So that's another piece of it. As you said, instant gratification is not always the answer, because sometimes you need to put it down, step away from it, then come back at it with a fresh mind, a fresh set of eyes. And typically that's when you have the breakthroughs, is when you've actually gotten away from it and then come back to it. So that's a key part of it. I also think that's very important for us to realize. So one thing I'd like to share too, from a self-development standpoint, one that I obviously, with the ASCENT Academy, I have done a masterclass, and the masterclass is specifically geared to do kind of exactly what we talked about now, especially the early modules are about figuring out your aspirations and what your motivations are and that type of thing. So if you are at a spot where you are ready to maybe do some self-development, the masterclass is free. There's a free downloadable version of it where you can work at your own pace, go through the 6 modules of aspiration, spark, commitment, evolution, navigation, and transcendence. And that, I think, will give you a great foundation to continue to move yourself forward. So I did want to share that. Now, I think we've kind of come to the end of this, and this has been great. What I'd like to do now is just throw it out there for what I'll call final thoughts. So any last things that you might want to share with our audience before we wrap up for the day? Erica, any final thoughts that you might want to share as we wrap up?
Sure. The most important thing is really how we communicate with ourselves. And if we can learn how to communicate with ourselves in a way that's gentle, that's kind, that's respectful of ourselves. I think that's great practice in how we communicate with others. So you don't have to believe everything you tell yourself, um, especially when there are those negative things. But one thing that you definitely can do is to be respectful to yourself because it reflects in everything that you do. How you feel about yourself, it shows.
100%. Thank you for sharing that. How you treat and respect yourself. Other people take that as to how you might treat or respect them. So it is a very important thing. Chris, what about you? Any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
Sure. Well, one of the things, like I said, I always this thing because I'm actually I'm finally making it. I'm admitting to myself every day that I'm still evolving. There is so much. And I was just talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and I said we were talking about some stuff. Did a little catch up yesterday, and I said I honestly think some of my best days are ahead for me, and that's a mindset. You know what I mean? I didn't always think like that. I mean, I was in. We've been in the throes of different things that are going on in our respective lives, and a lot of times we accentuate the negative things as opposed to the putting the weight on the positive things that we're doing. So I always, when I look at something negative that I'm not doing very well, or something I need to work on improving, you tend to forget the good stuff that you actually are doing in your life, and using that as fuel to get through the things that you're not doing well in your life. But also understanding that kindness part that says I can get better regardless. My phrase that I always say, my new catchphrase is progress is not measured in distance, it's measured in progress. So emotionally, if you can tell yourself I'm progressing a little bit, and just be and be content sometimes with it being a little bit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
As long as you are reaching forward, even in difficult times, it's probably going to turn out well. And at the end, when it's all said and done, you know what I mean? And that's how do we feel about ourselves? And they're not. We don't always like. I don't always like myself, but I work on liking myself more and more because I want to like my. That's the other thing is the goal is I want to like myself all the time. So, but you have to keep those things in the forefront of your mind as you navigate through this thing called life.
Absolutely, 100%. Thanks for sharing that, Chris. And I agree with you, especially how progress is measured, as you said, and that's by progress. So honoring that's very important. For me, one of the things that I look at is just from the standpoint of the journey itself, and that it is an ongoing journey. It's not a destination. You don't necessarily arrive and "Oh, I'm there, and that's the end of the line." That's not how it works. So you obviously continue to evolve and grow and work your way through it as you move forward. So understanding that, and then understanding that different things within your life, what's that old saying about sometimes it's for a reason, for a season, other times it's for a lifetime. So different people, different situations, different scenarios will come into your life again for a reason, for a season, or for a lifetime. And starting to understand that, and from a needs, wants, and expectation standpoint, maybe you don't need to wrap yourself up in something so deeply because it's only there for a specific reason. Once that reason it's done, it's over. But if it's something that looks like it's going to be there for a lifetime, then yeah, you might want to spend some time really getting to understand what are my needs, wants, and expectations for that particular thing, person, scenario, opportunity, whatever it might be. So that's a key piece, is to be self-aware of where you are in life as you evolve through life. Understand it is a journey. You'll continue to move forward. There is no finish line, quote unquote. And as Chris said, just be glad that you are making progress along the way. That's the final thing that I really wanted to share, is to let everybody know that. This has been awesome. I really appreciate you guys. This has been thank you for joining, getting up early here, and we're all actually in the same time zone, which is rare. But thank you for making it early here on a Saturday morning. To our audience, I hope you found value in this. Please like, share, and subscribe on the YouTube channel. And feel free to play it back anytime because it is live on YouTube. So you can watch the recording anytime you want. And until the next episode, which will be next week, everyone take care of each other, especially, and be safe. We'll see everyone soon.
Thanks, Bryan.
All right. Take care, guys. Bye.